We were exploring an abandoned building, and I think we found a dead body. Under this hearth, he fell asleep, so we left and called. Okay, that right there, that is the actual frantic 911 call from a group of trespassing teenagers late one Thursday evening in Monroe County, Michigan. They had literally just snuck into an abandoned juvenile detention center, a place called Boysville, probably expecting to find ghosts or, just looking for a cheap thrill. But instead, they stumbled into a scene that would kick off one of the most disturbing investigations in recent history. It's a case that starts with this terrifying discovery in a dark, empty corridor, and trust me, it spirals into something far more sinister than anyone could have ever imagined.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to be unmasking the Reapers. We're basically peeling back the layers of a chilling, multi-state murder conspiracy involving intense psychological manipulation, shocking betrayals, and a mastermind who is pulling all the strings right from the shadows. As we unpack this whole thing, I want you to pay close attention to the psychology at play. It's wild to see how quickly a person's reality can be overwritten by a predator, and how a group of seemingly unconnected, vulnerable people can be molded into a deadly, completely obedient weapon. Part 1. A gruesome discovery. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the detectives who first arrived at that abandoned juvenile center. The building had dozens of rooms and long, dark corridors. With no electricity, officers had to draw their weapons and clear the massive facility room by room, making absolutely sure they were the only ones inside. After an hour of searching, they finally made their way back to what those teenagers had found on the floor underneath a tarp.
Given the location, police obviously initially assumed this might be an unhoused person who had tragically overdosed. But that assumption was flipped on its head in an instant. The victim was surrounded by candles. She was covered in this unfamiliar bronze-gold substance, and there were these strange, bizarre scribbles and markings all over her legs. What's more, paramedics quickly confirmed she hadn't overdosed at all. The head injuries, they were consistent with 3 gunshot wounds. So this wasn't just a homicide, it looked incredibly ritualistic. Using a portable fingerprint scanner, police quickly identified the victim as 22-year-old local resident Kayla Sedoskey. So the morning after the discovery, police scoured hours of CCTV footage to build a timeline of Kayla's final known movements. Okay, so on February 15th at around 10 p.m., Kayla is seen leaving the Rosler Street apartments. An hour later, she walks across a bridge, stops, turns around, and gets into a black Mercury Milan. When investigators ran those plates, they found something absolutely alarming. The car was actually registered to a 44-year-old man named Stephen Bales. The kicker here? Kayla had an active protective order against him. When police rushed over to Stephen's house, they found a note taped to the door saying he and his wife Narina had left for their honeymoon. The timing was highly suspicious.
Part 2. The Ohio Connection. So, while Michigan police are sitting on their first major suspect, the investigation gets this totally unexpected jolt. We have to jump forward 2 weeks and travel over 100 miles away.
A 911 call was placed in Shelby, Ohio, by a 19-year-old named Bryn Smith. He was frantic, running for his life and literally just his socks, and he told dispatchers he had just escaped a dangerous man. He tells the Ohio police that the man he escaped from, Stephen Bales, was actually wanted for murder in Michigan. And it gets crazier. Bryn claimed that Stephen wasn't the actual killer, but rather, Bryn had video evidence on his phone of the real killer admitting to the crime. Ohio police obviously got in touch with Michigan investigators right away, and Bryn was brought in for questioning.
The woman in Bryn's video was a 33-year-old named Callan Ramsey. In the footage Bryn secretly recorded, Callan states plainly, "I shot her twice," and even admitted to throwing the murder weapon into a river. Michigan detectives rushed to Ohio to interview Callan. And this brilliantly illustrates the level of deception here. During her interrogation, she tried to play the innocent victim, insisting, "I would never kill anybody because I'm a sweetheart." But when detectives brought up that video, her facade completely cracked. She immediately stopped the interview.
Part 3. Inside the Reaper's Cult. So what does this all mean? Who exactly are these people, and how do Bryn, Kaylin, Stephen, and Kayla all connect? Well, as investigators dug deeper, they realized they weren't dealing with a gang or just some toxic friend group. They were dealing with something much darker.
When police finally executed a search warrant on Stephen's cramped one-bedroom apartment back in Michigan, they found evidence that at least 7 people were living there. 7! Stephen had adopted the alias Grim, like the Grim Reaper, and labeled all his belongings with it. He called his wife Narina Lady Death, and the group itself was known as the Reapers. Let's break this down real quick. Stephen was the mastermind, Kaylin was the shooter, Bryn acted as the lure, and 2 other individuals, Alex and Sierra, who they identified through photos from Stephen's Valentine's Day wedding, they supplied the weapon and acted as the ambush team. Stephen proudly called them his family.
But let's take a second to define what was really happening here. This was a textbook case of cult dynamics and coercive control. It's a really stark reminder of how easily vulnerable people can be manipulated, right? Stephen targeted individuals who are often struggling with addiction or at their absolute lowest. He'd initially offer them a firm handshake, some support, and a place to sleep. But that support, it quickly turned into a prison. He took their food stamps. He took their bank cards. He completely controlled their housing. As Bryn later explained to detectives, if you tried to leave Stephen's house, you'd be the next one to die. He demanded absolute financial and psychological submission.
Now, the underlying motive for Kayla's murder wasn't just about general control. He was driven by a twisted, toxic web of jealousy. You see, Stephen had created this deadly romantic triangle, simultaneously involved with his new wife, Narina, the shooter, Kaylin, and the victim, Kayla. For months, he deliberately fueled a bitter rivalry between Kaylin and Kayla. Investigators realized Stephen was intentionally stoking this jealousy, essentially using it as a psychological weapon to eliminate Kayla while keeping his own hands completely clean. It perfectly illustrates how an abuser can manufacture conflict to maintain ultimate power over a group.
Part 4. Turning on the mastermind. With this terrifying hierarchy mapped out, detectives knew the only way to take down Stephen was to break the ironclad loyalty of his followers right there in the interrogation room.
So the crucial point here is that not everyone was telling the truth about their level of involvement. Take Bryn, for example. He initially presented himself as this innocent hostage who bravely captured a confession video and ran for his life. But detectives had recovered his text messages. The hard evidence proved that for weeks, Bryn had been romantically messaging Kayla, gaining her trust to the point where she actually had him saved in her phone as boyfriend. Bryn wasn't just a bystander. He was the one who lured her out that night on Stephen's direct orders. Once they confronted him with this reality, the dominoes really began to fall. And the ultimate betrayal for the cult leader came from his very own inner circle. Even Narina Bales, Stephen's wife, the one he called Lady Death, turned on him. She confessed to police, saying he was the organizing this whole thing, controlling it and telling people to do this. Narina admitted that the group actually left to kill Kayla right after her and Stephen's Valentine's Day wedding. It was this totally macabre, twisted post-wedding ritual orchestrated entirely by her new husband.
Part 5. The deadly ambush explained. So with the followers finally cooperating, the detectives were able to piece together the horrific choreography of that night. Let's look at exactly how this deadly ambush was executed.
Here is exactly how it went down. Step 1, the lure. Bryn, posing as a romantic interest, picked Kayla up and drove her to that abandoned juvenile center, with Stephen secretly hiding in the backseat. Step 2, the lookout. Sierra waited there as part of the ambush team, while Narina stayed back at the apartment listening to a police scanner. Step 3, the execution. Alex supplied the firearm, and Kaylin, driven by that intense jealousy Stephen had stoked, fired 3 shots into Kayla. And finally, the cover-up. Stephen watched the whole thing happen. He then directed the group to return the next day to pour lotion and perfume over the body to mask the smell and to leave those strange ritualistic markings we talked about earlier.
Now, Stephen thought he had played the perfect game, right? But when he was finally arrested and sitting in that interrogation room, he made the ultimate slip-up. In trying to deflect the blame away from himself, he confidently told the detective that he was physically with Bryn at the exact time of Kayla's death. But here is the catch. The precise time of Kayla's death had never been released to the public. Just like that, the mastermind accidentally placed himself right at the center of the crime. When the detective revealed that they had Facebook messages proving his location anyway, Stephen completely shut down and demanded a lawyer. But it was way too late.
Part 6. Judgment and Justice. Stephen's web of lies had completely unraveled. His followers had turned on him, and the evidence was just overwhelming. Let's look at how the justice system brought the hammer down on the Reapers.
But before they could even face a judge, they had to be caught, and Stephen and Narina didn't go down without a fight. After fleeing Michigan, weeks passed with absolutely no sign of them. Finally, police got a lucky break. Bank surveillance cameras caught them on CCTV. Investigators tracked them over 700 miles away to a relative's home in North Carolina. A SWAT team surrounded the house, but Stephen refused to surrender, barricading himself inside. It was this incredibly tense standoff that lasted for hours, only ending when officers deployed tear gas, forcing the cult leader and his wife out into the open.
The courts meticulously weighed the roles of every single member of this deadly family. Alex Fico got 5 to 10 years for tampering with evidence. Narina and Sierra received lengthy sentences for second-degree murder. Bryn, the lurer, and Kayla, the shooter, they were both sentenced to a massive 40 to 60 years in prison. And the mastermind, Stephen Bales, the guy who thought he could control everyone and keep his hands clean, he was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy. He received life without parole, plus a consecutive second life sentence. The Reapers were officially dismantled.
But as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with one final, deeply unsettling thought. Remember that secret confession video Bryn recorded? Well, in it, Kaylin didn't just confess to killing Kayla, she bragged about killing 16 people. Now, investigators do believe Stephen and Bryn may have forced her to fabricate that number under pressure, and they couldn't tie her to any other homicides. But the terrifying reality of a highly organized cult like this is that they operated in the shadows for a long time. So the question remains, was Kayla Sedoskey really their first victim, or just the first one to be found? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.